Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have got a brilliant session lined up for you, exploring what it takes to transform your insurance organisation with data and AI. I'm going to start with some quick introductions to the session today. My name is Sophie Swift, as you can see on the screen, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's webinar. We'll be talking specifically about what is holding back data and AI in insurance and where the opportunities are. And there's been some really good research into this sector that we've done in partnership with the Insurance Network that I can't wait to show you in more detail on this call. For those of you who don't know Cynozure, we're a data analytics and AI company, and we support organisations across all types of industry, but lots and lots in insurance to reach their data potential and realise real business value from their data analytics and AI. We've worked with lots of different insurers, put a few of them on the screen now, and we like to help insurers to bring innovation from other sectors, but also to celebrate what's going on and happening and what is working really, really well in this sector. One of the things that we were really excited about for this session are the two guests that are joining us. So I'm joined by Jeremy, who many of you will know from the Insurance Network, and James from Cynozure. Do you both want to say hello and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. Hello, everybody. Yeah, for those that don't know, I'm Jeremy Burgess. I run the Insurance Network, and for this session, really, we'll be drawing on my experience from putting together the TinTech conferences and the Data Jam events and the research that we do there. So hopefully I can add a few insights and maybe a few questions just to put James on the spot.
We love that.
And hey everyone, I'm James, the CTO here at Cynozure. So I look after technology and AI for us and work with some of our largest insurance customers. So looking forward to sharing some insights with you all today.
Brilliant. So we've got a good panel style session planned for today. And before we dive in, I'm aware that some of the people on this call will have participated in the recent research that we undertook in partnership with the Insurance Network. Some of you may have been hearing about it for the first time as I'm talking about it right now. So to give you a little bit of background and fill you in, we recently launched a survey with the help of the Insurance Network to ask people working in this industry their thoughts and experience around data and AI, where the opportunities were, where the challenges are, what the hopes and dreams are for data and AI in this sector. These insights turned out to be really, really insightful, fantastic, and we are working on a report that will be shared later this year in September. If you contributed, you will get a copy of that, or if you'd like a copy, feel free to let us know. But for now, there are a couple of insights that we wanted to share early doors on this call and with everybody joining this webinar today. There are some that jumped out and were quite stark, and I think we should just dive straight into them. Jeremy, James, if you're both ready to go.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Brilliant. So the first one, and I'll keep this on the screen for a couple of moments. The very first one that stood out to us was just the sheer number of respondents in insurance who told us that their biggest priority this year was to develop a data-driven culture and internal capability. It was by far and away the biggest priority that people were reporting. And yet when we asked them where they were going to spend their budget and what their priorities were, many said that there was a discrepancy between what they wanted to do and what they were actually planning to do in terms of their data culture initiatives this year. I wanted to ask you then, Jeremy and James, why do you think there is this disconnect in the first place? Like, what is happening that means that so many insurers want a great data-driven culture, but aren't actually prioritizing making that happen? Just take this off so we can see you talk.
James, why don't you go first, James, and I'll follow up.
Yeah, sure. So I think data culture is one of those really funny topics. And I was trying to think in preparation for this, knowing that some of this was in the research about, could I think of any other examples of teams in the business that have like the equivalent of a data culture? Like, you don't really kind of get finance culture or IT culture or anything like that. So it seems to be a very particular thing for data teams to think about. And it's actually coming up a lot recently. I'd say over the last maybe 12 months or so, it's increased in frequency, the number of discussions we're having about data culture and programs and help in that space across people. And for CDOs and other data leaders, I think part of this has been driven by the fact that there has been a lot of investment in data technology, in building teams, and a corresponding struggle to realize appropriate value from all of that investment. One of the things that they're looking at when they're trying to diagnose, well, why is that, is going, well, it's maybe not the technology, it's not that we built a bad data platform or whatever, it's that people don't know how to engage with it properly, they don't know how to use these things in their day-to-day and bring it to life. So that's driving that kind of priority from a CDO point of view to say, hey, it's really important that we build these good data cultures and data literacy across our business. On the flip side, though, everyone else in the organization doesn't think about data culture. That's not a term that's coming up in their day-to-day and how they're looking at things. They're going, I've got a job to do, I've got value I have to deliver, and I've got problems with tools and data quality and access to things and all the kind of usual problems that you hear about. So when it comes to actually prioritizing budgets and investment and focus on these things, teams across the business are much more interested in solving those kind of problems instead of building a culture and literacy program. So you've kind of got that friction between what data teams think is really important and what business teams actually care about when it comes to kind of prioritizing things. So that, I think that's part of why we're seeing that mismatch in the survey results, because of those two different expectations and kind of starting points. I don't know, Jeremy, if you've got the same kind of view or different.
Yeah, so I was going to say that this probably stems from kind of competing priorities and also kind of a misunderstanding about what data literacy kind of really involves. So quite often when you talk to people about data literacy, they're kind of thinking about training courses or dashboard tutorials, but what we're talking about is really an embedded kind of data fluency, I guess, where you're thinking about all your process through the lens of the data that you've got, the data you can capture, the data you can move around. And so I think there's an educational piece that needs to be done within organizations about, rather than just saying data driven or data culture, what does that actually mean for your organization? And then how do you support that? And I think leaders, in order to become a kind of a data-driven organization, I think it just can't be assumed. It's a bit like any kind of cultural organizational shift. You can't just say it and then let it emerge. It needs to be nurtured and evolved, and you need to have leaders and champions, and that's not just at the board level. It's got to be across the organization, and people have really got to understand what it means. So I kind of agree with you on that those kind of competing priorities. But what I might say is that I think this might be a time thing, a transition thing. So we're probably talking about data now in the context of AI and how we use whatever type of AI you want to talk around. But at this level, we're now just going, oh my gosh, if we're going to use these AI-driven tools, we need to have our data in a much better shape. In order to do that, we need to put the pieces in place to do it. And I think we've only just not realized that. That's wrong. But if we are going to kind of leverage the benefits of AI, we really need to start with the fundamentals. And those for me are having a good data strategy, and what that means, having data literacy as part of that, but having all the, the technology, the operations, the process around that, deeply understanding what your processes are already, so that you can then look to improve them, either just improve them or use technology and data to do that. But then also having a kind of the strategic vision, goal, objective, challenge, whatever it is, crystal clear there, because I think sometimes this stuff is just randomly pointed. You know, we insurance is traditionally siloed as an industry and as organizations, and so you have pockets of either call them innovation or you know two-tier IT going on. You know, take your pick. So I think there needs to be a lot of clarity around kind of the overall vision for the strategy in the organization, and then you can kind of go back to the building blocks. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
It's a great point about that definition of culture piece and what it means to people, because you're right. For a lot, it's like we're going to go buy a data literacy training program or platform that people will learn about. But it means such different things across different industries, because, you know, when I think insurance, I go, well, we're not really having to convince anyone in insurance that numbers and data and information are important. That's been a fundamental piece of the insurance world for forever almost. Whereas you can go to other industries where data isn't important at all, and you know, lots of stuff can be gut feel and all these other things. So your starting point is very different. You know, to your point about where things are going with AI being a big focus that's perhaps driving some of this, that it'd be interesting to understand underneath that data culture driver, is that actually not about just, hey, we want people to use reports and use information and data as they make decisions day to day, but more we want to level up their understanding of some of the things going on under the hood that are required for those long-term strategic goals. How do we get those foundation rights, and what does that actually mean? What does good look like, and those sorts of things? Because it really is quite different what culture problems need to be solved across different industries and different levels of maturity.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And within different organizations, within organizations, you have kind of a bunch of people now. Kind of what I'm trying to talk about is a kind of democratization of AI as a tool. So you can go home now and you can try it and you can use it in your life. And I think that then has suddenly put onto data IT and ops teams suddenly a wave of requests for, oh, why don't we use it for this, and why don't we do that? And so it comes back to the prioritization piece, and then they go, oh, have we got the data for it? And you know, if you're not in shape, then it's very difficult to find the time and space to be able to try these things and what works and what doesn't. So I just think there's a massive shift going on within organizations. You know, if you talk to me 2 years ago, before kind of OpenAI and ChatGPT had kind of come out, that, you know, they were generally resistant to change and for technology, and especially if you look at the London market, which I kind of specialize in, there was, you know, particularly a resistance to change. That, you know, that's almost completely reversed now. There's, you know, people want to use these tools. They've seen them in action, but it's now kind of, how do you build the capabilities and the capacity to be able to kind of service all these requests and these great ideas and innovations that will really drive so that's why I come back to this. I think we're in this weird transition period where we've kind of flipped from going, well, I don't really like technology, to, oh my God, it's a savior, it's a silver bullet. And then trying to kind of, you know, look at all the moving parts and make the jigsaw fit, to use different analogies.
I really like that. And you both talked a bit about using things like having a really clear data strategy, jumping on people's appetite for using some of these tools and AI as ways that you can start building more internal capability and driving towards an improved data culture. You both work with so many different insurers. Like, have you come across examples of insurers that have good embedded data cultures, and what did they do to get to that point?
So yes, I have, and there are more and more of them. I think a kind of a common thread between successful organizations that are able to embed kind of a data culture is by having kind of cross-functional teams sitting in one place. So coming back to that kind of siloed mentality, and literally siloed on different floors, you know, by bringing cross-functional teams together to work on projects, having a kind of more agile approach to to working actually, then I think that kind of breaks down some of those barriers, and then people see, okay, right, I understand why I'm putting in this data, because down there it's absolutely critical for a reporting function or whatever it is, or now I know how that data flow works. I think we can do it better. Have we ever tried it this way, or question it and things like that? So I think putting teams together, having kind of those leaders that really understand it, empowering people to make decisions, which is really tricky, because we'll come on, I'm sure, to talk about governance and things like that. But having the ability to kind of allow people to experiment and then show and tell, those types of things, when organizations put those kind of bricks in place, I think you start to see the change happen. Don't know if you think so, James.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think I see all of those things are really important factors in it. And if I look at one of my clients, been working with for 2+ years now, first time CDO in there, and he's on holiday this week, so I won't be embarrassing him with some praise on this call about what a great job he's done. He has managed to help build a really successful culture without having any kind of formal culture literacy program in play at all. And one of the ways that he's achieved that, amongst others, is while there's big transformation programs going on and lots of large change happening, he has worked with key business teams, particularly in the underwriting and London market teams within the business, to build small focused product teams that have taken 2 or 3 specific problems that team is trying to solve, and then they've worked through and they've collaboratively built the solutions that they needed to build, mixing in some of our team as a partner, some of the central data team, some of the line of business team, and it's gone really, really well. And then he's built on that momentum and success. And you could tell it went well because everyone wanted to take credit for the success of it. So he built on that success and did a nice focused piece of dashboarding requirement. Again, really well received because it was for a new function. It was delivered really effectively. It was getting shown up to the CEO and the chairman and so on. It really was making a splash and getting people really excited. And then from that, he's now had other teams coming in and being like, we want to do the same thing in our area. Can we get a product team together? And I think that's one of those big indicators on are you having a lot of success, is when you can move from a sort of push to a pull with these things, that he's now got people coming to him saying, I want one of those. That's brilliant. I'm hearing such great things about it. Can I have some? And by doing it in small chunks and focusing in with those teams and enabling them, that's been really effective. It's almost an active strategy of he is trying to not only not hang on to responsibility, but actively push it into the business teams to say, look, I can give you some tools. There are some things in the center that I can build. I can get some platforms in place. I can start helping to centralize some data. I can give you X, Y, and Z. But you need to take ownership and responsibility of defining what the priorities are, the things that you want to build, and we'll help you with the people and the tools and the data to get them done. And that's been really, really effective. And he's coupled that with really strong work with the leadership team, building out key relationships across the business and just helping solve problems, things that people have been trying to do for ages and always just found they've hit brick walls on. He's helped get them over that hurdle and get something delivered, and it's just built an immense amount of goodwill for what he's trying to achieve in the business.
Yeah, and I think the tools also help with that. The fact that a lot of these new tools don't need to have specialist developers in order to fix some code. You can push it back to the business and go, here it is. Obviously with the governance around it. So that's really interesting. I agree with you, that kind of show and tell thing. James, in your experience, is there a way to incentivize business teams that perhaps aren't as engaged in the data journey? Have you seen anything that works just to not perhaps carrot and stick, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because carrot and stick is where my head goes. Is that one of the most effective things for me is, and we always used to have this in the first consultancy I used to work for, which was a Microsoft business intelligence shop many years ago. We never tried to sell to people who weren't already convinced that data was worth doing. So, where we were, say, selling a data warehouse platform and reporting kind of build, we never tried to convince those who weren't already convinced. We knew there was more than enough willing participants. And I think that applies really well internally in terms of make some people look really good. Make the people who are engaged and excited and want to do something look really good and perform really well, because then others who are perhaps less motivated and less interested in data, AI, and technology and so on, it gets them to really focus on what's important, because they don't want to be left behind. They don't want to look bad. They don't want to be like, well, we're not making as much money, we're not being as efficient, whatever those metrics and drivers are for them. It kind of forces them along. Making that really public then, which is almost, depending on where you sit perhaps on the league table, as a carrot or a stick, is share the stats, share the numbers for people. How often are your team logging into things versus other teams? How many data products have you created? What value have you delivered through it, and so on? Because nobody wants to be at the bottom of a list. So by exposing some of that, it's a really helpful way to get people aware and thinking about, I better be doing something even if I don't really want to, because I'm about to look bad.
Yeah, so I really like that as well. So if we take it back to the initial question about creating a data culture, if you kind of make those data processes transparent, and then you say you have not entered the correct data 18 times this week, and you're bottom of the list, and most people get it wrong once because it's just a fat finger or whatever, it's there, and it changes behavior. That's for sure.
Yeah, they say you've got to measure what you want to change. So if you want to change and improve accuracy of data being entered, put it out there, let people know who's doing well and who's not, and people will quickly adjust and think a little bit more carefully as they're doing things.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. Really quickly, because there were some surprising results in this survey on the technology side, and I think we're both keen from the bits that I've heard you speak about there to dive into that. But one last thing on this culture bit was that most insurers shared with us that there was strong board level support for data and AI initiatives. Is that what you were expecting? Is that surprising for you? What do you think that support looks like?
So it's not surprising. So in all the events that we've run, whether they be breakfast briefings or the events, I think there is board support for data, AI, automation initiatives. I think what's really important is the kind of the nature of that support. So I think increasingly boards understand that in order to have effective AI, you need to have good data. We've already talked about that. But I think sometimes there's kind of support can be passive. So might talk a good game, but actually when it comes to supporting it, so what am I talking about? So real support, like funding, but also having senior executives sponsoring or leading the change, being visible in the kind of data discussions at a board level and below, and kind of aligning incentives. We've just been talking about that around kind of reaching a level of data maturity. I think that's kind of the bit that's missing, I think, at the moment. But it's easy to say and harder to do. That's the kind of rub of it. And it's just difficult, isn't it? I mean, it is tough. So yeah, that's my kind of insight on it.
I love that. Thank you.
I guess as someone coming from originally a kind of non-insurance background and space, I'm more surprised than perhaps Jeremy, you are in terms of the level of support when I compare it to some of my other customers. But I do think you touch on the most important bit there, which is it just token support? Is it just, yes, data and AI is really really important to us, or does it translate into funding? Does it translate into at board meetings there is strategy, KPIs, updates on this stuff that they are talking about and focusing on? So is it translating into real, tangible action? Definitely one of the big drivers to shift that support kind of leveling up a notch has been AI. I think that has been a real eye-opener for a lot of leadership teams, and the recognition of the difference that is going to make, whether that's now or in 5 years or 10 years time, but the difference that is going to make has driven a real increase in terms of, right, we've got to do something, and data plays a big role in that. Get on and go, guys. So it's definitely interesting comparing across industries though, where that level of support varies.
Absolutely. I think we could open a can of worms on the exec support. As always, I really wanted to share the technology side of our survey results, which I am just going to flash up on the screen. I took that off and now it's slow to load. But one of the things that people did report was that they are really up against it and struggling with some perhaps legacy systems or outdated technology infrastructure. And as data leaders, they really want to deliver real value. But how do they do that without taking on a huge bill at the end of it in terms of modernising? That seemed to be a real challenge. It was one that I heard at Tintech a few weeks ago, Jeremy, from people out and about in different talks. I don't know if you have thoughts on how you can begin to modernise whilst balancing giving value back and not signing up to more and more cost.
Yeah, I can give a view. I can see some of the people on this call probably got more experience than me, but let me kick it off. Please feel free to disagree with me in the chat as well, by all means. But I think if we look back, so it's always good to look back, I think, as a starting point. So if you look back, 2 or 3 years time, maybe 5 years ago, it was about kind of big modernization, core systems, maybe 5-7 years, programs to really, move forward. I think those have now gone for 2 reasons. Firstly, cost. There's no way you're going to get sign off on those types of 5-year huge monolithic programs, but also kind of the, I don't want to use a word, but kind of the microservices approach now, where you can just take discrete areas of the business and kind of modernize that area. I think that has also kind of changed the tone. So I think the thing around the huge price tag, if you look at the whole thing, it's massive, but actually when you start to split it up into small discrete pieces, and you have a program of change, and you've got that priorities list correct, you're getting your data in order, you can actually move quite rapidly now with the data and the tools that are available. Certainly, if you look at where people are starting, kind of looking at the friction within their business processes and seeing how, firstly, they can understand how those processes are going wrong, and then either fix them or fix them with technology and data and automation and things like that. And you can get down some really granular level. I think also the tools that are available to do that now, you were talking, James, about having transparency over what people are doing, and then collating a list, a league table type thing. Well, that you can see the keystrokes, you can see how long it takes to do something. You can see that if somebody's off, there's a massive backlog of stuff that kind of piles up. So there's more transparency, I think, now within kind of processes and systems that perhaps years ago, it was just in somebody's head, whoever developed it on whatever application. So I think there are ways of doing it. I mean, that each organization is different, on a different technology stack. and on a different kind of journey as well. So there's not one size fits all, but certainly I think that's probably the change that I've seen over the last few years.
That point about everyone being on a different technology stack is really important, because it kind of depends which part of your legacy system is the outdated bit. If you've just got an outdated, say, data warehouse type platform, and you're going, oh, we're running an on-prem SQL server and it can't do what we need to do anymore, that I think is a much easier proposition to talk about how you can start shifting and adding value, because it's much easier to leverage some great new cloud tools that can be deployed quickly and put to good use, and you can take those kind of product-led approaches, break things down into bite-sized chunks that in and of themselves deliver value, so that everything that you're doing is always building towards an outcome. But if your problem is you've fundamentally got a very outdated, say, policy admin system, for example, that's a much bigger and much more complicated change, and it can be really hard to break it down into smaller chunks, like as awful as they typically are. I mean, I don't know anyone who enjoys a transformation program. Sometimes you are just going to have to lean into the fact that, yes, this is a big change, because we're changing a core piece of infrastructure that touches everything and everyone. There are techniques, there are methods. There's in fact, I went to a great session at Tintech on different migration strategies and approaches, and so there's some ways and frameworks to think about these things out there, but it can sometimes be unavoidably big. So I'd say wherever possible, what you want to be doing is, how can you break this down into small pieces, small chunks? And from a data perspective, make sure that you're not leaving data to be the last thing you think about, because that is such a common problem that I see, not just in insurance, but anywhere implementing a large new system, be it a CRM or an ERP or a finance system, you name it. Data is often not thought about up front. It's technology, and it's all the connections that are needed, and it's what's the screen's going to look like. And then you get to the end and someone says, right, I now need the report that shows me X. And you go, well, you haven't got anywhere in the system that captures X. That data doesn't exist. And suddenly program's delayed and it's not delivering what people need, and all sorts of problems. So starting with that from a data perspective, the end in mind, about what kind of things you want to be able to ask and answer from this new platform, might help you figure out if there's some quicker ways to achieve that, or at the very least, make sure that you're not thinking about that from the start, and that you're not going to go down a track and realize you've got a load of rework to do.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, have you seen any organizations, either in insurance or outside of insurance, that have kind of delivered some really quick wins to kind of, kind of turbocharge that and just get everybody behind that transformation? Where would you start if you had a blank piece of paper?
And it probably goes back to depending on what I'm transforming, I guess. As a data person, I can't help but want to start with thinking about the data model that goes at the heart of this. Because when I start to turn my organization into a data structure, not necessarily to the nth degree of data, not necessarily in terms of exactly how it's physically going to come to exist in systems, but I start to build up the view of, what do I need to know? How does it interconnect, interrelate, and then where that might live in different systems and how it might need to move between them. That gives me a map that I can start to think about breaking down into smaller chunks and being like, you know what, I can cut this bit off and I can solve it, and that would enable me to deliver these use cases. Depending on the level of change you're doing, though, there are definitely small projects you can do where you can take a team that's stuck with, I don't know, reports that take an hour to just run out of the system, and that then need a load of manual labor and work after they arrive to turn them into whatever's needed, and suddenly you've got a 2-day long process. That kind of thing I've seen done really well, where that can be consolidated into, hey, you press this button and in 30 seconds you'll have what used to take you 2 days. It doesn't have to be a crazy complicated project. It can be a clever bit of automation, the use of some newer tools, bringing in some different skill sets and different ways of thinking about things. And I think we can expect all of that to be supercharged as well to an extent through AI and agents that are starting to come along as well that can really move that agenda forward. But there are some things that there isn't a quick win for, and you just got to lean in and brace for the pain.
What are your predictions for the next kind of 12 to 18 months? Like if you've used the word embrace the pain, but embrace the opportunities as well. And there are lots of new technology. Jeremy, you've talked about AI adoption and the appetite for that. Like if you were betting men, what do you think your predictions would be for trends in the next 12 to 18 months in the insurance sector?
I will. So what I would say is the kind of the most interesting, I think, development or trend that I am seeing kind of live unfold before my eyes is this thing around agentic AI. And the more I see it in action, the more I just see it fitting in insurance processes and really helping. And we had a great session at TinTech that I was lucky enough to chair, where we had it was WPA. Mike Downing, the Chief Information Officer there, who had put in agentic AI. And what was interesting for this conversation was how much work they had done on their data in order to be in a place where they could put in place effective agentic AI agents working together to solve problems. So that was really fascinating from our data point of view, because they started on a data journey 7 or 8 years ago. I can't quite remember now, but it because they wanted to kind of automate processes within the system that they had built, and so they started to kind of get the quality of the data in the right shape, get in order, getting that data culture piece in place. So that's been like kind of a 9-year, and now they're able to kind of jump on that. I think for other organizations, it's not impossible, but the data piece of work is so fundamentally critical to that. But coming back to the prediction, I think I just think it's so exciting when you see the kind of drudgery and the grunt work that kind of gets done manually at the moment, where you go, God, if you freed up these great people that are working in the teams and get away from that manual data inputting and mistakes and swivel chair stuff, and you actually had these agents supporting great people, I really think that's a driver for growth, both in terms of, and innovation, because you'll be able to come up with new products and services that you wouldn't have been able to have to be able to deliver, because it would have been too expensive just using humans. So I just think that's one thing, but I just think it's a fantastically exciting time to be in the industry, just with there's so much stuff going on. But it comes back to our original point, having that strategic objective, having the leadership, having the culture, the data culture and literacy in place. It's all these kind of building blocks that you don't just put them in once either. You got to, it's like a house. You got to make sure that they're not rotting away or disintegrating, because really quickly people just go, why are we doing that? I don't need that data anymore, and suddenly the whole thing might, like a house of cards, come crashing down. But that for me is an exciting kind of development, I think.
I mean, I agree. Agentic AI is definitely probably going to be the number one dominating conversation for everyone over the next 12, 18 months. But I agree with everything Jeremy's just said there. So I guess coming at that from then a slightly different perspective, or some of the things that will go with this, I think a lot of people will still be limited in their deployment of agentic AI. So over the next 12, 18 months, there's still a lot of maturity to appear yet in the agentic space. Things are still moving very quickly. So for a lot of people, it will be the focus of some POCs, or maybe some limited and very specific deployments and use cases that they're testing out things. And with that will drive a focus on some of the foundational stuff that goes with it as they perhaps bide their time and wait for the market to mature a little bit. So I'm already seeing the rise of AI governance conversations come up a lot more as people go, it's great, we're going to do that, but what does that mean for our risk and governance side of things? How are we going to make sure that it's not going crazy and making decisions and doing things it shouldn't be? And what are the policies and regulations and laws that we're going to need to worry about making sure we're compliant with and able to demonstrate? So that's already a topic that, as people getting into that reality of agentic AI, is driving a look at governance. And I'm really excited because I think that focus on AI, and specifically the sort of agentic side of things, is getting people to rethink data more generally. So it's early days of this, but I can already see some of the patterns in the technology market that line up with this point, which is people are going to start thinking less about data as a dashboard or a report on the screen or a dump of data or even maybe a bit of analysis. They're going to start thinking about it much more as a combination of data plus AI plus UI and UX plus automation and broader digital technology and a whole load of other things coming together that can achieve much more sophisticated outcomes than just look at some numbers on a screen that help me make a important decision. So I think that's going to end up leading to, in the long run, probably not in the next 12 to 18 months, but beyond that, a much bigger change in terms of how people are actually kind of activating the value of data in their organizations, the kind of talent that they're going to be fighting over to be able to deliver on those things, and hopefully a corresponding shift in the amount of value that people can get out of this stuff, because the way it's being applied in the business is just much more sophisticated and useful. So I'm excited to see a trend in that direction.
That's so helpful. And I think it, just to echo, it's a really exciting time to be in this sector. Clearly so much to talk about, and I'm really conscious we're about to hit 1:45 the hour, which was the end of our panel session today. We've covered so much. It's been really, really insightful. Thank you both. Two big topics that have come out of both the survey and our conversation today have been harnessing AI momentum and driving data culture within insurance or across any organisation. If you're listening to this webinar and you're interested in either or both of those topics, there is another session that Cynozure are hosting later this summer, 14th of August. Very welcome to attend that one, and I hope to see you there. But before we do wrap up, James, Jeremy, do you have any closing comments?
So I was just thinking, just coming back to kind of our last bit there, James, and I was just thinking from that panel discussion where we were talking about kind of agentic, what should people take away to start preparing for it? Okay, we've talked about data, but and these are echoing some of your things, but I think from the panel it was clear that you needed to strengthen your AI governance. So you needed to have somebody who had a deep understanding around the technology, the data, and then the governance, and putting those rules in place, reimagining roles and not just automating them. So that I think there is a tendency in our industry to just look at a process and go, how can we automate that? Or how can we digitize that? And I think what agentic allows you to do is go, with these agents working together, where is the human in this process now? What's the data input? What is the customer output or the business output? And then devise a process, from scratch. And then I think the other thing is looking at building an architecture that can scale, adapt, and pivot. So you're not just putting in, another technology that, in 5 years' time, you're looking back going, oh, crikey, how are we going to fix this now? Because, the world's moved on. So I think they're my three kind of takeaways, if you like, for where people might want to start thinking.
Right.
Very similar for me, actually, in that if you're getting excited about agentic AI, there's never been a better time to jump into this stuff than now. But for those of you who are listening and thinking, we're not quite ready for this, I echo a lot of what Jeremy's just saying there, is take a second to then get ready instead. Focus on some of those fundamentals. Have you got good platforms and tools in place that collect data? Have you made sure it's clean? Have you got good governance and control around it? Can you prepare people with training for what's coming? Can you start looking for the use cases and opportunities ahead of time so that when you're ready to jump in, you can move quickly? So that, I think, would be my main message to people is, if you're not ready to jump in yet, take the time to get ready, because at some point you're going to have to, and you'll need to move quickly when you do.
Amazing. Thank you both. And a big thank you to everybody who has joined us to listen to our session this afternoon. We hope you found it enjoyable and insightful, and we hope we see you on a future one. And a massive thank you to you, James, and to you, Jeremy, for sharing your insights and experience with us this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speak soon, everyone. Bye.